Good. So I think I am in a very difficult situation. You have to speak, right? Three different things. I think Dr. Gulshan Rai has gone out, so some people has gone out with him. First difficult situation, right?
They will come back.
And second difficult situation is that I just came to know that I need to speak 15 minutes back. So I don't know what I am going to speak. And third is I am actually standing between you and lunch, right? So that's also the third difficult situation. But having said that, what I'm going to talk about now, yeah, so we all know that the world has changed for all of us, and so has risk, right? With acceleration of digital technology, cloud has taken mainstream. So my first point of discussion is going to be, how do you really make cloud secure, right? A lot of innovation there in many of my customers' mind. As part of my CIO advisory role, I advise a lot of customers, and the first question I tend to hear from my customers is that, okay, I'm going to put all my data in your cloud, in your house. Is it going to be secured, or I'm running some big risk basically? So first, how do we really ensure that cloud is secured so that our customers could take those transformation journey and transform to cloud? I'll probably talk about 6 points here. First is, I think a couple of dignitaries already talked about shared responsibility, right? So let's be very clear that cloud is a shared responsibility between your customers, your users, as well as you as a cloud service provider, basically, right? So security in the cloud and security of the cloud. You as a cloud service provider, since I represent Amazon, AWS, so security of the cloud is probably the cloud service provider's responsibility, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, right? But security in the cloud is definitely the tenant's responsibility, right? But how do you do that basically? This needs a lot of enablement, a lot of training across different people. I'll talk about what we are doing on the training front to do that as well, right? So point number one is that when you're thinking about making the cloud secure, whether it's on the security on the cloud or security of the cloud, you need to consider shared responsibility. Second, patch management. Do we really struggle on patch management or not? Right? Who owns the patch management basically? Is it the responsibility of cloud service provider, or is it the responsibility of the tenant, right? Second thing has to be taken care of. And the third thing, what I see basically in many of my customers, all of us know about serverless technology, right? And customers think that the moment I am serverless, I am secure, which is not true. Basically, it's a myth. Because the moment you are moving to serverless, maybe your infrastructure is secured, but the applications, the operating systems that is running on your infrastructure, you need to make those secured in terms of making your code secure, making your operations, operating system secured, so that you get the complete benefit of cloud security there, right? It's not that you have moved to serverless, so cloud security provider is going to take care of that, and you are secured there. Fourth thing, it's very important to know that where you are going to put your data and how. When I talk about data, it could be data in transit, it could be data in rest as well, basically, right? So many times we put all of our critical, non-critical data in one bucket, basically, right? That segmentation is very, very important, right? You can have even virtual private clouds, VPC is defined for your dev environment, QA environment, as well as production environment. And the fifth thing, which is the most important thing, is about establishing that continuous monitoring practices, basically, right? And most often we assume that we purchased a tool, we implemented something, and many times many customers actually purchase so many tools that when you talk to them, you will find that it's basically a museum of tools, right? They collect a lot of data without really understanding how they really make use of data and get insight out of those data, basically, right? So those are the things really need to be taken care of when we are thinking about making the cloud secure. So in terms of, just to summarize the cloud security part, it's all about understanding the fundamentals of shared security model, right? It's very, very important. It's all about bringing in a single point of control, single pane of view to talk about the cloud security, right? That's again important. Many times people talk about hybrid multi-cloud scenario. If you're using multiple clouds within a hybrid cloud environment, how do you really bring in the control, how do you bring in that single pane of control is very, very important as well, right? In the same time, focused on minimizing your security point solutions. That's also very, very critical, right? Then you talk about automation everywhere, right? So I think a couple of dignitaries already talked about minimizing the human task or human touch basically, right? How do you bring in that automation everywhere is also very, very important. And the last point is all about continuous conformity basically. I think Dr. Deepak talked about the compliance aspect basically, right? How do you build in those policies, setting up those procedures, process, method and tools are again part of your continuous conformity that you need to look at when you are thinking about cloud security. So that's one part of it. Then I think we had a lot of discussion around Internet of Things basically, right? IoT. And whether we like it or not, I was reading through some Gartner's predictions a couple of months back, and Gartner has predicted that by 2026 there will be 64 billion IoT devices installed across the globe. 64 billion IoT devices, right? That means the attack surface perimeter is increasing or not, right? It's very difficult to control that many IoT devices, and of course all of us use that, starting from our smart vehicles to smart wearables to whatever Alexas of the world, which is at our home, smart assistants, right? So all those things are going to play a very critical role, and we need to really plan about how do you really minimize those attack surface, even though the attack surface is really increasing there. How do you really minimize the attacks? That's the second part. Third part is all about blockchains. We had discussions around blockchain. How many of you really heard of something called as Eclipse attack? Right? Eclipse attack, right? So if you are using blockchain, you are using those smart ledgers, smart contracts, you are actually vulnerable to Eclipse attack basically, right? Eclipse attack means maybe somebody can impersonate, sit on your node and make the approval on your behalf, and all your money transaction is already done, right? So how do you really prevent those? So blockchain brings in those threats as well when we talk about making our system secure. Then we talked about quantum, right? So quantum brings in a lot of possibilities and a lot of challenges as well basically, right? When I talk about quantum, of course your cryptography goes for a toss with the faster processing of qubits that we kind of come across. If that is the case, how do you really make your quantum cryptography happen and make systems really vulnerability free, right? Do we really embrace techniques like zero vulnerability computing, for example, ZVC, right? Or I think Professor Ramlan talked about in the morning today, SOC basically, right? I call it as 3 SOC basically. What we call as 3 SOC basically is all about solid state security on the chip basically, right? So those are the things we need to think about when we plan to make your quantum computing, quantum cryptography more secure, and really get out of the scenario where the quantum computers used by the hackers to decrypt any cryptographic logic, even if it is homomorphic encryption or neuromorphic encryption, it can be decrypted if you are using the quantum technology there, right? So those are the things that should be taken into account. I think I was talking about, when Dr. Ramlan was presenting, I was thinking of talking about both model stealing as well as data poisoning, right? That's my favorite topic. In fact, I have a couple of patents on that space. So if you are using GenAI, how do you really ensure that? Of course, GenAI is going to be very useful, right? All of us know that there is no point in talking about what is the benefits of GenAI. But if you are using GenAI, you are vulnerable to model stealing as well as data poisoning, right? How do you prevent those, right? So those are the things we need to think about. And I was going through a report that was done last week by Splunk. All of you probably heard of Splunk, which recently got acquired by Cisco. And Splunk actually interviewed 350 plus security executives and CISOs across the organization. And one thing clearly came out of that interview is 90% of those people felt that somewhere or other they have been kind of part of ransomware attack in the past. Right? 90% of the 350 plus security executives who were interviewed talked about that. And I can talk about one of my experience, and this will little scare you as well. This is about a bank. I will not take the bank name, Indian Bank in Mumbai, right? And when I was doing the consulting with the bank and I talked to the CISO of the bank got actually hit by a ransomware attack, right? And then I talked to the CISO basically after that, what happened basically, right? If you are, what remedial measures you took after you got hit basically, right? The CISO said that since I got hit by the ransomware attack, I thought that it's not going to happen again to me. right? And 3 weeks later, the bank was again hit by the ransomware attack, basically, right? That's the level of, and we can blame the CISO. There are history behind that, basically, right? I hope none of you lost your money, basically, if you are having an account in that bank. But having said that, I think Professor Ranjan Bose talked about how you balance the compliance versus the priorities, right? And if you really look at, traditionally the boardroom discussions are all about compliances instead of looking at how do you really make it strategic for the organizations. And if that is the case, CISOs never get the funding, right? Any of you have done the CISO role or interacted with CISOs, you will know that CISOs probably in earlier days never got the funding from the boards most often, right? They are understaffed, right? So what not? They have their own set of stories to tell, right? So to cut the long story short, so this is almost like a cowboy, right? There is no solution to it, and unless you make a very methodical approach, very programmatic approach to handle this, you are not going to be very successful in this journey, basically, because you implement something. The attackers are smarter; they know what you are implementing. It's almost like a cat and mouse game all throughout, basically, right? So we need to really go one step ahead. And again, the same Splunk report I was talking about, GenAI, most of the CISOs who are interviewed, out of those 350 plus CISOs, they talked about that probably GenAI promises them more challenge when it comes to cyber security than giving them the advantages. However, same set of 35% of them told that they are somehow experimenting using GenAI to solve the business problems, right? That's the dilemma, that's the dichotomy that's happening on the industry today that we need to be aware of. End of the day, of course, I think Professor Ranjan Bose talked about CISOs to be kind of empowered, CISOs to be given more free hand to manage those things, they need to be enabled, which is right. But the way within Amazon philosophically we look at, it's no longer a CISO's responsibility alone when it comes to security, basically, right? It's everyone's responsibility, right? We at Amazon strongly believe that security is job zero. Anything and everything you do, it has to be associated with security for all the employees within the organization. So that's what we practice in Amazon, what we call as a technique that is known as SBR technique, right? Strategic, behavioral and reflection technique. What does that mean? At the start of the year, we empower, maybe in our customer organization, within our own organization, we give points. Let's say for an example, every employee within an organization is given as 100 points, right? Any good thing you do on the security front, you get additional points. And anything, let's say you clicked on a link, you got attacked by a phishing attack, then you get those many points minus, right? And by the year end, the points that you have, that decides your career progression, your growth within the organization, and at the same time, this also gives an indication to the organization that maybe there is a learning need, training need that needs to be implemented, right? That has been working good within Amazon, and many of our customers are doing this, right? Then the last part I just want to touch upon before I close is about, I don't know how I'm doing on the time, okay? So maybe I'll take last 1 minute, right? So when I talk to the CISOs, most often we see that there are challenges, right? Many times what happens, people take really responding to the challenges too much time, basically. They take too much time, right? And by that time, it's almost like a forest fire. Once the fire is done, things have happened, right? If you are really not fast in addressing that, then you are in trouble. And many times when I talk to the customers, I see a 400 pages of incident response plan. Right? Is it really possible when the things happen, a stakeholder to go through the 400 pages plan to figure out what actions needs to be taken, right? It has to be practiced. It has to be really done in a very programmatic manner so that when things happen, you are ready. And most often, as you know, the attackers attack actually in a very inappropriate time, and sometimes even the skill levels of the organization is not even enough to address those challenges. So, first thing, that response needs to be very fast. The second thing is basically, many times what we see is basically we rely on incomplete information, right? Are we really collecting all the data? Are we collecting all the signals to take informed decision? Are we using right process, method and tools to take the right decisions basically? That's again important. I think Professor Amlan again talked about observability part of it, right? So many times we are predicting things using so many so-called tools. How do you really predict maybe unknown from known patterns, right? Or from known to known patterns. But system dynamics is done in such a way that there are so many unknown patterns that you need to take care of, right? How do you really deal with those unknown to unknown patterns? Again, another area of research on the cybersecurity space that we need to really look into, right? So, how do you really get clarity on those data? And yeah, so I think those are the things probably that we are seeing in the industry. I think the whole focus of the industry is that how do we really build that? Maybe I'll just ask a last question basically. Who is the most resilient creature across the globe? Maybe little GK test before the lunch. Most resilient creature across the globe?
Creature,
Cockroach. Okay. Ants. Yeah. So there is a small microscopic creature called tardigrade, right? So tardigrade, it's almost like it has done such a way that it can survive in the most rigid conditions, it can survive in the most hottest conditions, right? It can stay without food, without water for ages, right? So somehow it was not there initially when it was born. But over a period of time, it has mastered the art of making it so much resilient that probably it will exist bearing the death of the sun. Today, any applications we are building, any systems we are building, whether we call it as, like I talked about zero trust architecture, zero vulnerability computing, whatnot, 3 SOC, I was talking about basically. What we do, I think our core focus needs to be really resilient enough and be a tardigrade resilient organization, tardigrade resilient community to address all the challenges that the cybersecurity world is going to face today. This story is going to continue, it's not going to end. It's 100, maybe more than 100 years journey, and this race is going to continue, but I think we need to better prepare ourselves to meet the growing cyber threats that's coming across all of us in front of